I sat in my empty apartment, staring at a photo of my 6-year-old son Jackson. It had been 4 months since I lost custody after my own parents and sister testified against me. Their lies painted me as unstable and negligent. The judge believed them over me. Today, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was my sister Amanda, sobbing. "We made a terrible mistake, Braden. Stephanie set us up. She's taking everything from Mom and Dad now. We need your help." I smiled coldly. They didn't know I had been planning for this moment. The life I had built with Stephanie seemed perfect for 8 years. We met during college, married after graduation, and welcomed Jackson into the world 2 years later. Those first years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. Stephanie was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed to love me as much as I loved her. Jackson became the center of my universe from the moment I first held him. My parents, Frank and Diana Moore, had always been particular about the people in my life. Growing up, they scrutinized every friend I brought home and questioned every decision I made. When I introduced them to Stephanie, something shifted. They embraced her immediately, often referring to her as the daughter they never had. This stung considering they already had a daughter, my older sister Amanda. "Stephanie just understands family values," my mother would say, implying I somehow didn't. "She fits in so naturally with us." Over holiday dinners, my father would raise a glass to Stephanie before acknowledging anyone else. "To the best addition to our family," he'd toast, while I sat quietly next to my wife. Amanda didn't hide her resentment toward me either. 2 years older and perpetually single, she watched my software development career flourish while she struggled to keep steady employment. "Some people just have everything handed to them," she'd mutter when I mentioned a promotion or bonus. The day I closed on our 3-bedroom house in a good school district, Amanda stopped speaking to me for 2 months. Despite the family dynamics, Jackson brought me immeasurable joy. I coached his soccer team every Saturday morning, the highlight of my week watching him run across the field with determination beyond his years. Weekends were for science projects, building volcanoes that erupted on the kitchen counter or constructing tiny solar systems that hung from his bedroom ceiling. During the week, I made sure to be home for dinner and bedtime stories, even when project deadlines loomed. Everything changed after Stephanie's promotion to junior partner at her law firm. The late nights started gradually, 1 or 2 evenings a week, then 3, then 4. "It's just temporary," she assured me. "Making partner requires sacrifice." I believed her and adjusted our lives accordingly, becoming both mother and father to Jackson most evenings. One night, while Stephanie showered, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. A message preview caught my eye. "Miss you already. Tomorrow same time?" It was from David, her boss. Scrolling through their conversation revealed weeks of intimate messages, dinner plans, and hotel meetings disguised as client consultations. When I confronted her, Stephanie didn't deny it. She stood in our kitchen, hair still damp from the shower, and told me with clinical detachment that she wasn't fulfilled in our marriage anymore. "I need space to figure things out," she said, already packing a suitcase. "David understands my ambitions in a way you never could." Within 24 hours, she had moved out and filed for divorce. The initial custody arrangement was joint, a week with me and a week with her. Jackson was confused but resilient, adapting to the new routine with the flexibility only children possess. For 2 months, this arrangement worked. Then suddenly, Stephanie pushed for full custody. "Jackson needs stability," she argued. "Your unpredictable work schedule isn't good for him." This claim baffled me, as I had specifically arranged with my company to work remotely 3 days a week to accommodate Jackson. The turning point came when I discovered Stephanie had visited my parents' home multiple times without my knowledge. Jackson mentioned it casually over dinner at my apartment. "Mommy and Grandma made cookies together yesterday," he said, innocently unaware of how this information chilled me. "And Aunt Amanda was there too. They talked a lot when they thought I was playing with my tablet." I called my mother that evening. "So, Stephanie's been visiting?" I asked casually. A long pause followed. "She's still family, Braden," my mother finally responded, defensive. "The divorce is between you two, not us." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was happening behind my back, but I couldn't yet see the full picture. I should have been more prepared for what came next, but nothing could have truly prepared me for the depth of betrayal awaiting me in court. The morning of the custody hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with cautious optimism. My lawyer, Peter Granville, had prepared a solid case demonstrating my involvement as a father. We had documentation from Jackson's school showing my regular attendance at parent-teacher conferences, testimonials from his soccer team parents, and evidence of the stable environment I provided. Even the court-appointed evaluator had noted in her report that Jackson appeared well-adjusted and securely attached to both parents. "We're in good shape," Peter assured me as we settled at our table. "Joint custody is still the most likely outcome, possibly with you as the primary residence given your flexible work arrangement." Stephanie arrived with her attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Lauren, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics in family court. They sat across from us, Stephanie not once making eye contact with me. The judge, an older man named Judge Wilson with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, called the court to order. The proceedings began routinely enough, with both lawyers presenting opening statements outlining why their client should have primary custody. Peter presented our case first, methodically showing evidence of my parenting capabilities. Things seemed to be going well until Lauren announced her witnesses. "The court calls Frank Moore," the bailiff announced. I froze. My father? Why would my father be testifying in my custody hearing? I turned to Peter with panic rising in my chest. He looked equally surprised. My father walked to the witness stand, dressed in his best suit, the one he wore to church on Easter Sunday. He was sworn in and then, looking anywhere but at me, began to speak. "Braden has always had trouble controlling his temper," my father stated, his voice steady. "Even as a child, his outbursts concerned us. We hoped he'd outgrow it. But there have been incidents as an adult that worry me when it comes to my grandson." Lauren guided him through a series of questions, each answer more devastating than the last. My father described an incident where I supposedly threw a plate across the room during a family dinner because the food wasn't prepared to my liking. This never happened. He claimed he'd witnessed me yelling at Jackson until the boy cried when he spilled juice on my laptop. Another fabrication. "Mr. Moore, would you feel comfortable leaving your grandson in your son's sole care for extended periods?" Lauren asked. My father paused, a pained expression crossing his face, as if this testimony was difficult for him. "No, I would not," he finally answered. "I love my son, but Jackson needs more stability than Braden can provide." Next came my mother, who tearfully described times she'd allegedly witnessed me neglecting Jackson during visits to their home. She claimed I was often distracted by work calls, leaving Jackson unattended for long periods. She described finding Jackson alone in their backyard once while I was napping inside, a complete fabrication that made me clench my fists under the table. "Diana, has Stephanie discussed her concerns about Braden's parenting with you?" Lauren asked. My mother nodded. "Many times. She's tried to work with him, but Braden refuses to acknowledge any issues." Peter objected to the hearsay, which the judge sustained, but the damage was done. I could see Judge Wilson's expression changing, growing more concerned with each testimony. The final blow came when Amanda took the stand. My sister, with whom I'd shared a childhood bedroom for 10 years, produced photos she claimed showed me intoxicated while caring for Jackson. The photos were from a family barbecue 2 summers ago, where I'd had exactly 1 beer. They were carefully cropped to remove the context and other people. "Amanda, how would you describe your brother's drinking habits?" Lauren asked. "Concerning," Amanda replied without hesitation, "he's functional, so most people don't notice, but our family has watched it progress over the years. I've seen him drink a 6-pack in an evening and still get behind the wheel. Pure fiction. I rarely drank more than 1 or 2 beers and never drove after drinking." I turned to Peter, who was frantically making notes. When Peter cross-examined my family members, they remained consistent in their lies. They had clearly rehearsed. Peter seemed ineffective against their coordinated testimony, unable to shake their stories or expose the contradictions I knew existed. By the time all testimony concluded, Judge Wilson's decision seemed predetermined. He awarded temporary full custody to Stephanie, with me granted only supervised visits twice a week at a family center. "Based on the testimony heard today, I have serious concerns about Mr. Moore's ability to provide a safe and stable environment," Judge Wilson explained. This temporary arrangement will continue for 6 months, after which we will reassess based on Mr. Moore's compliance with anger management classes and a substance abuse evaluation. I sat stunned as the gavel came down. How had this happened? How had my own family orchestrated this complete character assassination? Outside the courtroom, I confronted them in the hallway. "How could you do this?" I demanded, struggling to keep my voice level. "Everything you said in there was a lie. Every single word." My mother couldn't meet my eyes. My father put his arm around her protectively. "It's for Jackson's own good," he said firmly. "Sometimes being a parent means making difficult decisions." As they turned to leave, I overheard my father murmuring to Stephanie, who had joined them. "You kept your end of the deal, now you'll keep yours." I stood frozen in the hallway long after they'd gone, those words echoing in my mind. What deal had my family made with the woman who'd betrayed me? What could possibly be worth destroying their relationship with their son and lying under oath? As I finally walked to my car alone, I realized the depth of what had just occurred. I hadn't just lost custody of my son, I had lost my entire family in one fell swoop. The world I thought I understood had shattered completely, and I had no idea how to begin picking up the pieces. The weeks following the custody hearing blurred together in a haze of disbelief and depression. I went through the motions at work, but my productivity plummeted. My boss, Martin, called me into his office after I missed a critical deadline for the 3rd time. "Look, Braden, I understand you're going through personal issues, but I can't keep making excuses to the clients," Martin said, not unkindly. "Take some time off if you need it, but when you're here, I need you present." I nodded numbly, promising to improve. The truth was, I could barely function. My apartment, once filled with Jackson's laughter and toys, now felt cavernous and empty. I kept his room exactly as it was before the custody change. Dinosaur bedspread neatly made, books aligned on the shelf, waiting for a child who rarely got to see it anymore. My first supervised visit with Jackson was scheduled at the family center, a depressing building with beige walls and uncomfortable furniture. A social worker named Melissa sat in the corner of the room, clipboard in hand, observing our interaction. When Jackson arrived, he ran to hug me, but something had changed. He seemed hesitant, uncertain. We played with the center's toys, read books together, but there was a new distance between us that broke my heart. "Daddy, did you do bad things?" Jackson asked suddenly while we were building with blocks. I froze, aware of Melissa watching intently. "What do you mean, buddy?" "Mommy said you did bad things and that's why I can't stay at your house anymore." His little face was serious, troubled. "I didn't do anything bad, Jackson," I said carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, and right now, the judge thinks it's best for you to live with Mommy most of the time. But I'm working to change that." Jackson nodded, but I could tell he was confused. What had Stephanie been telling him? What had my parents said? The visits continued this way, twice a week for 2 hours each time. Always supervised, always in that sterile environment. Jackson gradually became more comfortable again, but each goodbye was torture. I'd watch him walk away with Stephanie, looking back at me with sad eyes, and it took every ounce of willpower not to run after him and take him home where he belonged. Outside of work and these visits, I became a hermit. Friends stopped calling after I declined enough invitations. I avoided social media, unable to bear the happy family photos that populated my feed. Most evenings, I sat alone with a legal pad, trying to figure out what deal my family had made with Stephanie and why they would betray me so completely. One Saturday night, after a particularly difficult visit where Jackson had cried at drop-off, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Tyler Davidson, my friend since 3rd grade, holding a 6-pack of root beer and a pizza. "You're not answering my calls, so I figured I'd just show up," he said, pushing past me into the apartment. "And before you tell me to leave, I'm not going anywhere until we talk." Tyler had always been like this, stubborn and direct. We ate pizza while I finally unloaded everything that had happened, including my family's betrayal and the mysterious deal I'd overheard mentioned. "That's seriously messed up," Tyler said when I finished. "Have you considered that Stephanie might have something on your parents? Or promised them something they desperately want?" I shook my head. "My parents are comfortable, financially stable. What could Stephanie possibly offer them that would be worth destroying their relationship with me and lying under oath? Tyler thought for a moment. I know someone who might be able to help. Guy named Carl who works out at my gym. Former private investigator who went through something similar with his kids years ago. Want me to introduce you? 3 days later, Tyler brought Carl to my apartment. Carl Lancaster was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the watchful eyes of someone who noticed everything. He listened intently as I recounted my story again. Your family's testimony wasn't spontaneous, Carl said when I finished. That level of coordination means they prepared together. And that comment about a deal is significant. Have you looked into your parents' finances recently? I admitted I hadn't. My parents had always been private about money matters. Start there, Carl advised. In my experience, when family members act completely out of character, it often involves money. Also, start recording every interaction you have with them from now on. Ohio is a one-party consent state for recordings, which means as long as you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without telling them. Carl recommended equipment and tactics, showing me how to use small, unobtrusive recording devices and how to store the files securely. Document everything, he emphasized. Build your case methodically. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, but only if someone works to expose it. With renewed purpose, I began investigating. I started by checking public records and discovered my parents had co-signed on a massive loan for Stephanie's new house in an upscale neighborhood, one she couldn't possibly afford on her own, even with her promotion. The paperwork had been filed just 2 weeks before the custody hearing. Next, through casual conversation with Jackson during a visit, I learned that Stephanie had been dating someone new, a man named Patrick who often stayed overnight. When I gently asked who Patrick was, Jackson innocently replied, "He's Mr. Howard's son. Grandpa knows him from work." Patrick Howard, son of William Howard, my father's longtime business partner. The connections were starting to form, but I still couldn't see the complete picture. During this time, I also attended the court-mandated anger management classes and submitted to the substance abuse evaluation, which found no evidence of addiction issues. I complied with every requirement, determined to give the judge no reason to extend the temporary custody arrangement. Then came another revelation. While dropping Jackson off after a visit, I glimpsed Stephanie's laptop screen showing an investment portfolio statement with my parents' names on it. The glimpse was brief, but I saw enough to register that the amount was substantial, far more than the conservative investments my parents typically made. That night, I sat in my apartment with Tyler and Carl, piecing together what we knew. "She's got them investing with her," I said. "Somehow she's convinced them to put significant money into something." Carl nodded thoughtfully. "And she's dating your father's business partner's son. That creates another leverage point. The question is, what exactly is she investing their money in? And why did she need their testimony so badly?" We didn't have to wait long for the next piece of the puzzle. The following day, Amanda called me for the first time since the court hearing. "Can we meet for lunch?" she asked, her voice subdued. "Just you and me. I need to talk to you." I agreed, making sure to bring my new recording device. The restaurant Amanda chose was a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place where tables were spaced far enough apart for private conversation. She was already seated when I arrived, looking thinner than I remembered and fidgeting with her napkin. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. The recording device was in my pocket, already active. "I know you probably hate me right now." "I don't hate you, Amanda," I replied truthfully. "I just don't understand why you lied about me in court." She looked down at her untouched water glass. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it for me," I said, keeping my voice level. "You destroyed my relationship with my son based on complete fabrications. I deserve to know why." Amanda sighed deeply. "Stephanie came to me first, before Mom and Dad. She said she had evidence of my prescription drug use that she'd turn over to my employer if I didn't help her. I could have lost my job, Braden. I finally have a stable position, and I panicked. This was news to me. I knew Amanda had been prescribed medication for anxiety years ago, but had no idea she might be abusing it. What about Mom and Dad? What's their excuse?" "I don't know exactly," she said, avoiding my eyes. "But they've been investing a lot with Stephanie's boss, David. Some kind of exclusive fund that's supposed to have amazing returns. They put in almost all their retirement savings. And this investment opportunity was contingent on them lying about me in court? I pressed. Amanda shrugged uncomfortably. I think there's more to it than that. They've been acting strange lately, worried. Dad checks the financial websites constantly. And last week I overheard Mom on the phone with her bank, trying to increase the line of credit on their house. We parted without any firm resolution, but I had confirmation of my suspicions on record. Amanda seemed genuinely remorseful, but not enough to come clean about her lies. At least not yet. Following Carl's advice, I expanded my investigation. I discovered that Stephanie's boss, David Mercer, had started a private investment fund that promised returns far above market average. Through careful research, I learned that several of my parents' friends had also invested significant amounts. During my next supervised visit with Jackson, I gently asked questions about his grandparents. Do Grandma and Grandpa seem happy when you visit them? Jackson shook his head. Grandma cries sometimes, and Grandpa yells on the phone a lot. They're sad about the money. What about the money, buddy? I asked, keeping my tone casual as we colored together. I don't know. Grown-up stuff. But Mommy says not to worry because everything will be fine once the big payday happens. This big payday became the next focus of my investigation. Tyler helped me set up a fake email account posing as a potential investor interested in David Mercer's fund. The response we received included a glossy prospectus promising 20% returns through proprietary trading algorithms and exclusive market opportunities. Every red flag for a potential investment scam was there, but presented in sophisticated, convincing language. One afternoon, knowing my parents would be at a doctor's appointment, I used my old house key to enter my childhood home. I felt no guilt about this invasion of privacy. They had sacrificed any right to privacy when they destroyed mine in court. In my father's home office, I found financial documents revealing they had taken a second mortgage on their paid-off home of 30 years. They had invested over $600,000 with David Mercer's fund, nearly everything they had. As I was carefully replacing the documents, my phone rang. It was my mother's best friend, Susan. Braden? Your father's in the hospital. He had some kind of heart episode while driving. He's stable, but I thought you should know. I rushed to the hospital, only to find Stephanie already there with my mother. When she saw me, my mother's expression flashed from surprise to guilt before settling on cold formality. What are you doing here? She asked. Susan called me, I said. How is he? Minor heart attack. The doctor says he'll recover, but he needs to reduce stress. She emphasized the word stress while glancing pointedly at me, as if my presence alone might cause my father's condition to worsen. I have a right to be here, I said firmly. He's still my father, regardless of what happened in court. My mother looked away. Stephanie has been so helpful through all this. She's handling all the insurance paperwork and talking to the doctors. That's when I noticed something odd. When a nurse came with forms, she handed them directly to Stephanie, who signed them without hesitation. Later, I managed to glimpse one of the forms at the nurse's station. Stephanie was listed as having power of attorney for my father's medical decisions. When had that happened? I called Carl that evening, relating everything I'd discovered. This goes deeper than custody, Carl said gravely. Your ex is systematically taking control of your parents' finances and now their medical decisions. I've seen this pattern before with elder financial abuse, though your parents aren't elderly. Something bigger is coming. We need to accelerate our timeline. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pieces were there, but the complete picture remained just out of reach. What was Stephanie's endgame? Why target my parents so specifically? And how did winning custody of Jackson fit into her larger scheme? The answer began to emerge the next morning, when Tyler texted me a link to a financial news article. David Mercer's investment firm was under preliminary investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for irregularities in reporting and client fund management. The article was brief and buried in the business section, but its implications were enormous. If David's investment fund was fraudulent, my parents stood to lose everything. And Stephanie, as his junior partner and apparent accomplice, would be implicated as well. Unless, of course, she had positioned herself as another victim rather than a perpetrator. The custody battle, the lies, the power of attorney. It all suddenly made terrible sense. Stephanie wasn't just trying to take Jackson from me out of spite or for leverage. She was systematically building a narrative where she was the responsible parent and concerned family member, while isolating me completely. If the investment scheme collapsed, she could claim she too had been deceived by David, just like my parents and the other investors. And my family, having testified against me in court, would be unlikely to ever admit they'd been manipulated. They would be trapped in their own lies, unable to seek justice without exposing their perjury. It was elegant in its cruelty. But Stephanie had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated how far I would go to uncover the truth and protect my son. The implosion began on a Tuesday morning. I was at work when Tyler called, his voice urgent. "Turn on CNBC now," he said without preamble. I pulled up the financial news stream on my computer. The headlines scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "Mercer Capital Management under federal investigation for suspected Ponzi scheme." The reporter detailed how David Mercer's exclusive investment opportunity had allegedly been paying earlier investors with money from new clients, while most of the funds were being siphoned into offshore accounts. The estimated losses were in the tens of millions, affecting dozens of investors. My phone immediately began ringing. It was Amanda, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "It's all gone," she cried. "Everything. My savings. My house down payment fund. Mom and Dad's retirement. All gone." "Where are Mom and Dad now?" I asked, already grabbing my car keys. "Home. Dad can't stop pacing. And Mom hasn't stopped crying since the news broke. Braden, they put up their house as collateral. They're going to lose everything." I drove to my parents' house, bracing myself for whatever reception awaited me. When my mother opened the door, she looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking. "Braden," she whispered, then covered her face. "Oh God, Braden." I stepped inside to find my father sitting in his recliner, staring blankly at the financial news still broadcasting details of the scandal. Amanda sat on the couch, clutching a tissue box. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. "Everything," my father replied without looking up. $620,000. Our life savings. The second mortgage. Even the money we set aside for Jackson's college fund. "Where's Stephanie?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral even as I activated the recording device in my pocket. "Not answering her phone," Amanda said bitterly. "Hasn't returned calls or texts since the news broke this morning." My mother looked up at me, her expression shifting from devastation to dawning horror. "You knew, didn't you? That's why you came here today. You knew this was coming." "I suspected," I admitted. "I've been investigating since the custody hearing. I knew something wasn't right when you all testified against me with coordinated lies." My father finally looked at me, anger flashing through his despair. "So you came to gloat? To tell us we deserve this?" "No," I said firmly. "I came to understand why my family betrayed me so completely that they would lie under oath and help take my son away from me." The room fell silent, except for the continuing news coverage. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice barely audible. "She promised us 20% returns, guaranteed. Said it was a special opportunity that David only offered to select clients. We thought it was a blessing when it came along. The medical bills from your father's back surgery last year wiped out more of our savings than we let on. And the custody hearing. What did that have to do with your investment?" I pressed. My parents exchanged glances, the weight of their actions clearly visible on their faces. Stephanie said if we wanted to stay in the investment fund, we needed to help her get full custody. My father admitted slowly. "She claimed you were unstable, that you'd been threatening her. She had documents, text messages, witnesses, all fabricated," I said. "You could have asked me. You could have questioned any of it. We were already in so deep financially," my mother whispered. "And she made it sound so reasonable, like we were protecting Jackson. She had answers for everything, explanations that seemed to make sense at the time. She played on our financial fears," my father added, looking ashamed. "Said if we backed out of the fund, we'd lose our initial investment completely. But if we stayed in and helped her with the custody situation, we'd get the full returns when the fund matured next year." The pieces continued falling into place. And the power of attorney? When did that happen? My mother looked down at her hands. After your father's heart episode. Stephanie said it would be easier if she could handle the medical and financial decisions directly, especially with the investment fund. She has the legal expertise we don't. She's been isolating you, I said, cutting you off from independent advice, from me, from anyone who might question what she and David were doing. As we talked, Amanda's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it, her face paling. David Mercer was just arrested at Miami International Airport. He was trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. My father put his head in his hands. What about Stephanie? Is she mentioned? Amanda scrolled through the article. It says authorities are seeking his alleged accomplices. No specific names yet. That evening, as the full scale of the fraud became clear through continuous news coverage, my parents received an email from Stephanie. Amanda forwarded it to me immediately. I'm as shocked and devastated as you must be, Stephanie wrote. David deceived all of us. I've lost everything too. I'm working with authorities to help recover what we can. Please don't speak to anyone about our investments without consulting me first, as it could jeopardize the recovery efforts. She's still trying to control the narrative, Carl said when I showed him the email that night. Notice she's positioning herself as another victim, not an accomplice. And she's trying to keep your parents from talking to investigators independently. The next morning, my father received a call from the FBI, requesting an interview about his investments with Mercer Capital. When he told me about it, I offered to accompany him. You'd do that? He asked, surprise evident in his voice. After everything, you're still my father, I said simply. And I want the truth to come out. All of it. Before the interview, I explained to my father that I had been recording conversations and gathering evidence of Stephanie's manipulation. The FBI needs to know everything, including how Stephanie pressured you to testify falsely in the custody hearing. It establishes a pattern of deception and coercion. My father aged before my eyes as the reality of what they'd done sank in. We'll lose you forever, he whispered, and we may have already lost everything else. I can't make promises about our relationship, I said honestly, but the truth is the only way forward now. 2 days later, Stephanie filed emergency court papers, seeking full permanent custody of Jackson, with no visitation rights for me. Her filing claimed I was harassing her family during their financial crisis and attempting to alienate Jackson from her. She's desperate, Carl said when I showed him the filing. The fraud investigation is closing in, and she's trying to secure whatever leverage she can. If she has full custody of Jackson, she might think you'll back off to protect him. I called Peter, my lawyer, immediately. We need to request an emergency hearing of our own, I said. I have evidence that directly contradicts their original testimony and shows Stephanie manipulated my family into lying under oath. As the legal machinery slowly turned, Stephanie became increasingly unavailable to my parents. She stopped returning calls, claiming she was cooperating with authorities, and too overwhelmed to discuss the investment situation. My mother finally reached out tearfully, asking for my help understanding their legal options. We don't know who to trust anymore, she admitted. Everything Stephanie told us turned out to be lies. That admission was the opening I needed to implement the final phase of my plan. With Tyler and Carl's help, I carefully orchestrated a series of meetings that would give my family the opportunity to come clean completely, while ensuring everything was properly documented for the court. The conference room at Tyler's office building provided the perfect neutral setting for what I needed to accomplish. With Carl's guidance, I had set up recording equipment that captured both audio and video without being obvious. Ohio's one-party consent law made this legal, but I wanted multiple recordings from different angles to ensure nothing could be disputed later. I invited Amanda first, telling her I wanted to discuss possibly helping her financially, since she was facing foreclosure on her house. When she arrived, looking exhausted and defeated, I offered her coffee, and then got straight to the point. Before I can consider helping you, I need to understand exactly what happened with the custody hearing, I said. I need the complete truth, Amanda. No more partial explanations. She broke down almost immediately. Stephanie came to me 3 months before the hearing, she confessed. She had photos of me picking up prescription medications from multiple pharmacies. I've been struggling with Adderall dependency for years, getting prescriptions from different doctors. She threatened to send the evidence to my employer and the state licensing board. I'd lose my job, possibly face criminal charges. "So you agreed to testify against me?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral, even as the recording equipment captured every word. Amanda nodded miserably. She coached me on exactly what to say. The drinking allegations, the photos from the barbecue, everything. She had it all scripted. Said if I deviated at all, she'd release the evidence immediately. And after the hearing, what did she promise you? A $30,000 consulting fee for helping with some legal documents. It wasn't explicitly for the testimony, but the timing made it clear. I used it to pay off credit cards and make a down payment on my house. Amanda wiped at her eyes. The check cleared just before everything fell apart with the investment fund. 2 days later, I met with my mother under similar pretenses. Her confession was even more detailed. "Stephanie showed us documents claiming you were in serious financial trouble," my mother explained, her voice breaking. "Bank statements showing late mortgage payments, credit card debt, even gambling losses. She said you were hiding it all, and that Jackson wasn't being properly cared for while with you." "None of that was true," I said quietly. "I know that now," she whispered. "But she had what looked like real documentation, and she caught us at a vulnerable time, right after your father's back surgery when our finances were strained. She offered us both the investment opportunity and a separate $20,000 payment for family support that wouldn't need to be repaid. And she specifically asked you to testify against me?" My mother nodded, unable to look me in the eye. She had it all prepared. Told us exactly what incidents to describe, even though they never happened. Said if we wanted to protect Jackson and secure our retirement, this was the only way. My father's confession came last, and was perhaps the most painful to hear. "I've made terrible mistakes in my life, son," he said, his voice ragged. "But betraying you, like that, might be the worst. Stephanie and David presented us with what looked like irrefutable evidence of your instability. Then they showed us projected returns on their investment fund that would solve all our financial problems." "The deal I overheard you mentioning outside the courtroom?" I prompted. My father closed his eyes briefly. "If we testified according to their script and helped Stephanie get primary custody, we would receive preferential investment terms and an additional $50,000 for Jackson's college fund. If we refused, they would not only deny us entry into the fund, but would also call in a business loan that David had extended to me and William Howard 2 years ago. It would have bankrupted our partnership immediately. So you chose to sacrifice my relationship with my son to protect your business and financial interests," I summarized, fighting to keep my voice steady. "It sounds despicable when you put it that way," my father admitted. And it was. We justified it by telling ourselves we were protecting Jackson and that you'd still have visitation. We convinced ourselves the allegations might have some truth to them. It was easier than admitting we were being blackmailed and were too cowardly to stand up to it. With each confession recorded from multiple angles, I had everything I needed. That night, I met with Peter to review all the evidence we had accumulated. "This is extraordinary," Peter said as we went through the recordings. "Witness tampering, perjury, blackmail, financial fraud. Stephanie and David weren't just running an investment scam, they were using it to manipulate the family court system. Will it be enough to get the custody arrangement overturned?" I asked. That was still my primary concern. "More than enough," Peter assured me. "I'm filing for an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow morning. With evidence this compelling, Judge Wilson will have no choice but to revisit his decision." Before Peter could file the motion, I received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Parkview Coffee at 7 a.m. Come alone. S." Stephanie had somehow learned I was gathering evidence. I consulted with Carl immediately. "It's an opportunity," he advised. "But be extremely careful. Record everything, and make sure the meeting is in a public place, exactly as she suggested." The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, selected a table with a clear view of the entrance, and activated 2 separate recording devices. Stephanie arrived precisely at 7, looking nothing like the polished attorney I was used to seeing. Her hair was pulled back severely, her face pale and drawn without its usual perfect makeup. "I know what you're doing," she said without preamble as she sat down. "Collecting evidence, turning my family against me." "They're my family," I corrected her. And they're finally telling the truth after you manipulated them into lying. You have no idea the pressure David put on me, she said, lowering her voice. He threatened to ruin my career if I didn't help him bring in more investors. Your parents were perfect targets with their savings and equity. And the custody battle? Was that David's idea too? Stephanie hesitated. That was a complication. I needed leverage to ensure your parents' cooperation. Full custody of Jackson gave me that leverage. You used our son as a pawn, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. I'd like to propose a deal, she said, ignoring my comment. I'll voluntarily give up primary custody and agree to joint custody again. In exchange, you give me all the recordings you've made of your family's confessions. Why would I agree to that? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Because those recordings don't just implicate me. They prove your family committed perjury. They could face criminal charges. Is that what you want for your parents? For Amanda? For Jackson to see his grandparents prosecuted? It was the final confirmation of her character. Even now, facing imminent exposure, she was still trying to manipulate and control the situation. No deal, I said firmly. The truth comes out, all of it. Whatever consequences follow are the result of choices you all made. Stephanie's expression hardened. Then I'll fight you with everything I have. I'll tell Jackson you're trying to send his grandparents to jail. How do you think that will affect him? You've done enough damage, I said, standing up. It ends now. As I walked away, she called after me. This isn't over, Braden. But it was. The next morning, Peter filed our emergency motion with all the evidence attached. By afternoon, the FBI had expanded their investigation to include Stephanie's role in the investment fraud and the connected custody manipulation. And Judge Wilson, upon reviewing our evidence, scheduled an emergency custody hearing for the following week. The courtroom was more crowded for this hearing than the previous one. News of the connection between the Mercer investment fraud and our custody case had leaked to local media, drawing both reporters and curious onlookers. Judge Wilson's expression was grave as he called the court to order. Before we begin, he announced, I want to make it clear that this court takes allegations of witness tampering and perjury extremely seriously. The evidence submitted has raised significant concerns about the testimony presented in the previous hearing. Stephanie sat with a new attorney, a stern-looking man named James Barton, known for handling high-profile criminal defense cases. My parents and Amanda sat behind me, having agreed to testify truthfully this time. Peter presented our case methodically, starting with the timeline of events connecting the investment scheme to the custody manipulation. He played selected portions of the recorded confessions, their impact visible on Judge Wilson's face as he listened. Your Honor, Peter concluded, the previous custody determination was based entirely on perjured testimony coerced through blackmail and financial manipulation. We ask that you vacate that ruling immediately and restore joint custody at minimum, with consideration for primary custody to be awarded to my client. When Stephanie's attorney rose to respond, he seemed to struggle with his argument. Your Honor, while my client acknowledges that some financial improprieties may have occurred with Mercer Capital Management, she maintains that her custody petition was filed in good faith based on genuine concerns about Mr. Capital Management, Moore's parenting. Judge Wilson interrupted. Counselor, I've just heard recorded confessions from 3 witnesses admitting they were coached to lie under oath in this very courtroom. Are you suggesting those confessions are fabricated? No, Your Honor. But my client was not present during those recorded conversations and cannot speak to their accuracy or context. Then perhaps your client would like to address the recording of her own meeting with Mr. Moore yesterday, where she explicitly offered to trade custody for the suppression of evidence. Peter countered, holding up another flash drive. Stephanie whispered urgently to her lawyer, who then requested a brief recess to confer with his client. When they returned 15 minutes later, the attorney's demeanor had changed completely. Your Honor, in light of developing circumstances, Miss Bennett would like to request a continuation to prepare a more comprehensive response. Request denied, Judge Wilson said firmly. This is an emergency hearing specifically called to address evidence of fraud upon this court. If your client needs additional time, she may have it, but the temporary custody order is hereby vacated, effective immediately. Stephanie's lawyer leaned over to whisper to her again. After a moment of visible internal struggle, she stood. Your Honor, I wish to withdraw my petition for full custody and consent to joint custody arrangements, she said, her voice tight. Judge Wilson studied her for a long moment. Given the evidence before me, Miss Bennett, I'm not inclined to grant you joint custody either. The manipulation of this court and the use of a child as leverage in what appears to be a financial fraud scheme calls into serious question your fitness as a parent. What happened next shocked everyone in the courtroom. Stephanie's lawyer stepped back, and she addressed the court directly. If I may speak plainly, Your Honor, I recognize that my actions appear indefensible. I was caught in circumstances partly of my own making and partly beyond my control. David Mercer threatened my career and possibly more if I didn't help secure investors. I made terrible choices under that pressure. Judge Wilson's expression remained unchanged. Miss Bennett, are you admitting to knowingly presenting false testimony to this court? Stephanie hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Are you aware that is a criminal offense? I am, she said quietly. In that case, this court has no choice but to refer this matter to the district attorney for potential prosecution. And regarding custody of the minor child Jackson Moore, I am hereby granting full temporary custody to Mr. Braden Moore, pending a complete review of this case. The gavel came down with finality, and the courtroom erupted in murmurs. I sat stunned, barely processing what had just happened. Full custody. After months of supervised visits and limited access to my son, I would finally be bringing him home. Outside the courtroom, my family gathered awkwardly around me. My mother was the first to speak. We don't expect forgiveness, Braden. What we did was unforgivable. But we want you to know how deeply sorry we are, and that we'll accept whatever consequences come, legal or otherwise. I looked at my parents and Amanda, seeing genuine remorse in their faces. I can't pretend the last few months never happened, I said honestly. The trust between us is broken, and it will take time to rebuild, if that's even possible. But I don't want Jackson to lose his grandparents and aunt completely. What does that mean? My father asked cautiously. It means we start with small, supervised visits, similar to what I had to endure. It means you get therapy to understand why you were so easily manipulated into betraying your son. And it means complete transparency from now on, about everything. They nodded solemnly, accepting these terms as a starting point. The aftermath unfolded gradually over the following weeks. Stephanie was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, witness tampering, and perjury. David Mercer, already in custody, faced even more serious charges as the mastermind behind the investment scheme. The SEC worked to recover some of the investors' money, though most, including my parents, would never see all of their savings again. The day I brought Jackson home permanently was the most emotional of my life. I had prepared his room exactly as he remembered it, with a few new additions, including a telescope he had mentioned wanting during one of our supervised visits. Is this really my home again? He asked as he explored the apartment, his expression uncertain. Yes, buddy. This is your home, and I'm never letting anyone take you away again. That night, as I tucked him into bed, Jackson asked the question I'd been dreading. What happened to Mommy? Why did the judge say I should live with you now? I chose my words carefully. Mommy made some mistakes that she needs to fix. The judge thought it would be best for you to stay with me while she works on that. You'll still see her, but it might be different for a while. Did she do something bad? She made bad choices, I said, not wanting to demonize his mother despite everything. Sometimes adults make mistakes, even big ones. The important thing is learning from them and trying to do better. Like when I broke your phone and didn't tell you right away, he asked. I smiled at his innocent comparison. Something like that, but much bigger. The most important thing for you to know is that both Mommy and I love you very much. And none of this is your fault. He seemed satisfied with that explanation for now, though I knew there would be more difficult conversations in the future. In the months that followed, we established a new normal. Stephanie eventually accepted a plea deal that included probation and community service, but no jail time, conditional on her cooperation with the larger fraud investigation. She was allowed supervised visitation with Jackson twice a month. My parents and Amanda began the long process of rebuilding trust. They attended family therapy with me, where we worked through decades of dysfunctional patterns that had made them vulnerable to Stephanie's manipulation. They also faced their own legal consequences, receiving probation and community service for perjury, mitigated by their cooperation with authorities. The first family dinner we had together, 6 months after the final custody hearing, was awkward but healing. Jackson was delighted to have everyone together again, unaware of the complicated emotions swirling among the adults. As we sat around the table, my father raised his glass of water. "To second chances," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And to Braden, who taught us all what real strength and integrity look like." 1 year after regaining custody, I hosted Jackson's 7th birthday party at our new house, a modest 3-bedroom I had purchased in a neighborhood with excellent schools. My parents were there, as was Amanda, all of them working to rebuild their relationship with Jackson and with me. Stephanie attended briefly, dropped off a gift, and left without drama, respecting the boundaries we had established. That evening, after all the guests had gone and Jackson was playing with his new toys, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Dad, what does integrity mean?" "Grandpa says you have lots of it." I sat down beside him, touched by the question. "Integrity means doing the right thing, even when it's really hard. It means telling the truth and standing up for what you believe in, even when people try to hurt you for it." Jackson considered this seriously. "Is that how you got me back? By having integrity?" "That's part of it," I said, pulling him into a hug. "But mostly I got you back because I never gave up. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter what. And you, Jackson, are at the top of that list." As we sat together, surrounded by birthday decorations and the evidence of a life rebuilding itself, I reflected on the journey of the past 1.5 years. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also revealed strengths I never knew I possessed and clarified what truly mattered in life. The path to justice had been painful, but the truth had eventually come to light, as truth always does when pursued with persistence and courage. The lesson I hoped to pass on to Jackson wasn't about revenge or even justice, but about the power of documenting truth and maintaining integrity through life's darkest moments. Sometimes the people closest to you cause the deepest wounds, but healing begins with honesty and the courage to face reality, no matter how painful. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content, and share it with others who might find strength in knowing they're not alone in facing family betrayal. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me, and I wish you the wisdom to recognize truth and the courage to stand for it, no matter the cost.